Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. And on behalf of the California Department of Education, Special Education Division, and the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, we'd like to welcome you to the fourth in a series of 7 weekly webinars focused on secondary transition and presented by members of the California Transition Alliance leadership team. Today's presentation will address course of study, goal development, and include accommodations, diploma options, and career technical education. My name is Kevin Schaefer, Director of Program Support with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of El Dorado County. Also with us is Kristen Brooks, Executive Director of the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of Riverside County, along with Dawn Berlin and Janelle Mercado, Program Support Specialists. Next slide. The SIP project provides support to LEAs across California to increase inclusive opportunities and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. For more information on the project and to stay current on events throughout the state, you can visit our website at www.sipinclusion.org or join us on Facebook and Twitter at SIP Inclusion. A Padlet has also been developed for future access to recordings, resources, and registration that we will address in a moment. Next slide. We have included the registration link for you here, including a Spanish version for all upcoming webinars for sharing with staff and families. For your convenience, we've muted all participants, but please utilize the chat box for questions and clarifications. Just be aware when using the chat that you are responding to all panelists and attendees. We'll do our best to address your questions. Just know that if we are unable to answer live, there will be a Q&A sheet created and posted on the Padlet for each webinar. Additionally, our team will be adding links to the chat box as we understand they are difficult to copy from the slides. Next slide. For this presentation and those scheduled over the next 4 weeks, we've created a Padlet of resources for you to access in the future. Simply click on the resource you're most interested in and download as directed. The first column contains overarching resources, while each subsequent column contains resources specific to each webinar topic. To access the Padlet, which will continue to be updated, you simply need the web address on the slide and feel free to share it with colleagues. Be sure to join us next Wednesday, May 20th, for information focused on the role of the parent. Also note that in the column for today's webinar, please note that the resources that the presenters will be addressing are available. Next slide. Before we begin, we have a couple polling questions we'd like for you to answer. The first, we'd like to know who's here. Who's in the audience? Are you a parent or a family member, a student, an educator, agency representative, post-secondary education or training, or other? If you're other, please enter in the chat. We'll wait till the polling slows down a bit. Great, it looks very similar to previous webinars. At 73%, we have educators, followed very closely by agency representatives, post-secondary education or training, and other. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, one more polling question. How would you rate your knowledge of transition as defined in IDEA? Please click your response now. Looks like we have quite a few people that are in the trenches and want to hone your knowledge. You've come to the right place. You are about to experience really a plethora of resources from the team. And remember that the Padlet will always be available to you to return to and explore. So it looks like 57% in the trenches and want to hone their knowledge. Thank you for participating. All right, let's move to the next slide. Okay, if we can remove the poll.
It's off on my side. Can you see the new slide, Kevin?
I cannot.
It's off on mine. I see course of study goals.
Okay. All right. We are grateful for this
Oh,
unique
just came up.
collaborative opportunity with Sue Sawyer and her team of experts. Please remember to take care of yourselves and those you love. I will hand it over to Sue, who will introduce her team, and thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome everyone. This is the fourth of a series of 7 webinars, and a lot of you have hung with us all the way through, so we appreciate it. Could I see the next slide, please? On mine, the poll is still showing. Could we close that?
Anybody else seeing the poll? It's not on my end.
Yeah, I see the poll as well.
You should
Vicky.
be able to close it on your own.
Kevin, if you're the host, you may need to close it.
Okay, I closed it on my own. First, let me introduce the California Transition Alliance. It was formed in 2005 as a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. And we formed the Alliance because we really believed that there was a need for support and resources that were available to youth and youth-serving professionals who support youth as they transition from high school to adulthood. Next slide. We accomplish this through creating resources and tools. They are available on our website. I have to admit, everything on there is free, so we're not a good business model. We also have just posted a resource so you can order the book and other resources that are referenced today. So that problem has been solved because some of you asked if you could purchase the printed versions. We also provide workshops. We host statewide institutes. We collaborate with state and national partners. We lead the work groups. I lead the high school diploma work group, and Richard Rosenberg leads the Social Security work group. And we play a leadership role on the California Community of Practice on Secondary Transition. The foundation and the outline for the webinars has been the book, Secondary Transition Planning, The Basics. We started writing this book in 2013, and it had to be updated annually until probably the last 2 years. We update it more frequently just because laws are coming out and things are changing. I want to focus your attention on the cover because the cover is meaningful, and we address some of these issues in every webinar that we do. One, it's a young child looking down a road, and there are 3 words surrounding that child. One is hope. And we believe that every person who needs to set a goal for their future has to have a sense of hope and a sense of optimism about their future. They have to believe there's something out there for them. They have to have confidence. They have to have a belief in themselves. They have to have confidence that they have the skills and abilities to do what they want to do. And third, they have to have a sense of trust. Sometimes that trust is trust in adult allies. Sometimes it's trust in financial aid or transportation. And sometimes it's trust in things like food, clothing, and shelter. But every person who has to set a goal and plan for something has to have, in the future, has to have hope, confidence, and trust. If one of those are lacking, then they struggle with setting goals. If I don't have a sense of optimism, why would I try? If I don't have any confidence myself and don't believe I can do anything, why would I even risk starting to believe in myself? And if I don't trust that the resources are available, even though I have hope and confidence, why would I try because I can't do it anyway? So as you look at helping students and young adults set goals for their future, keep these 3 factors in mind. Next slide. Today we're going to explore the course of study. And these pages in the basics books are pages 22 to 24 that are going to be covered today. The course of study is defined as a multi-year description of coursework to achieve the student's desired post-school goals from the student's current year to anticipated exit year. It must intentionally reflect the student's post-secondary goals. Student progress towards achieving those secondary goals must be monitored minimally annually. And every student with an IEP is required to have a course of study. The law doesn't say the course of study is not necessary for any population. So we hear sometimes, well, I work with the adult transition age population, they don't need a course of study. In reality, the law requires it. The course of study should list the classes that must be passed to earn a high school diploma. You can go to your school counselor. They do a course of study called the Education Career Plan. The course of study is not a transcript. Transcripts are the grades and credits I have earned to date. The course of study is what classes am I going to take from now until the day I exit school. And issuing a certificate of completion, because we talk about it being aligned with a diploma, issuing a certificate of completion is a local decision with local criteria defined by the LEA. Next slide. So a course of study basically are the classes you complete in high school that lead to the high school diploma. The current statistics are that 70% of students with disabilities earn a high school diploma in the state of California. 14% are classified dropouts. 85% of non-disabled students earn a diploma. And the bad news is the rate for students earning diplomas for students with disabilities went from 73% to 70%. So the challenge that we face is, how do we increase the number of students with IEPs who earn a diploma? Next. How do LEAs reduce dropout rates and increase graduation rates? How does the focus on the diploma impact a child's transition? And how many paths to a diploma are there? Next slide. Oh, how do expectations, grading practices, access to career technical ed classes impact students with IEPs? We're going to learn more about that today. So what are the California course requirements for a diploma? The state of California lists the minimum graduation requirements. So on this chart, you can see that the state requires 13 year-long courses in English, math, science, social science, visual and performing arts, or foreign language, or career technical education, and PE. We also have a path to the standard diploma through the career technical ed pathways, and they require the same classes as the state course requirements, but they have two differences. They focus on career technical education, and they also focus on dual enrollment with the community colleges. The CSU and UC systems have course requirements that are referred to as the A to G courses that prepare students for the university as incoming freshmen. So the issuance of a diploma is a local control issue. Each LEA can define their graduation requirements. For example, a local education agency can require a senior project or can require other things in addition to the coursework. And CSU and UC have different course descriptions for the required classes. Next slide. In addition, the Ed Code stipulates that there is, the LEA has the ability to adopt alternative means for pupils to complete a prescribed course of study, which includes practical demonstration of skills, supervised work experience, career technical education classes, or ROPs, interdisciplinary study, independent study, credits earned by a post-secondary institution. Requirements for graduation and specified alternative modes for completion must be made available to pupils, parents, and the public. Next slide. So when we talk about using alternative means or differentiated instruction, what students does that impact? One group is foster youth. One is English learners. The other are the students in alternative ed programs. They are defined as students who fail to thrive in general ed or are in jeopardy of not earning a diploma. And their grades and credits are calculated differently, and they can earn credits through work experience or independent study. Other exemptions include students who are homeless, adjudicated, and children from military families. But the students with IEPs are required to meet the LEA diploma requirements or are offered a certificate of completion. So next slide. So this is what it looks like. Group of students in a hallway. One student says, I'm taking A to G classes, I'm going to the university. Another one says, well, I'm in the career technical ed pathway. I want to attend the community college and work. Another one says, I'm a foster kid. I just moved here. Glad I qualify for a diploma that requires fewer classes. Another one might say, my EL classes are helping me qualify for a diploma. And another one might say, I'm earning a diploma through independent study and work experience. But the student with the IEP has to meet the LEA standards. So if the LEA says you have to have a foreign language or advanced math, and they struggle with those, they can't graduate with a diploma. So one of the things you need to think about is whether or not any of your students qualify for being a foster youth, so they meet the foster youth standards. The next two slides are ed codes that are just citations related to the diploma. They're summarized in a document in the Padlet called General Information. But you can see that the ed code affects foster youth, youth in jeopardy, career technical ed. Next slide. And they have challenges with course completion options instead of A to G coursework, modified curriculum, and assessment. Next slide. We worked on this presentation is developed in collaboration with all the people that participated in the high school diploma work group. And we started in 2013 and we were on a roll. And then in 2017, the federal government developed a definition of the high school diploma. And in that definition that says that the high school diploma is the one that is awarded to the preponderance of students in the state, fully aligned with state standards, or a higher diploma, not aligned to the alternative academic achievement standards, does not include a GED or a HiSET, a certificate of completion or attendance, or similar less credentials, such as a diploma based on IEP goals. And the vast majority with disabilities should have the same high quality academic coursework as all other students in the state. That came out in 2017. So what are the diploma options available today in California? The California Department of Ed does not issue diplomas. They stipulate the course of study. We have the Gold Seal Merit Diplomas, we have Local Education High School Diploma, and we have the Adult Education Diplomas. Next slide. The diploma is a ticket. A lack of a diploma is a barrier to employment and post-secondary education. The diploma is a ticket to meeting job requirements and completing online applications. Excuse me. 90% of employers prefer to hire youth with a diploma. 30% of jobs are low skilled and susceptible to automation. 66% of jobs require a diploma in post-secondary education and training. It also is a ticket to qualify for post-secondary education and training and financial aid. When the federal rules came out, financial aid changed just a little bit. So colleges and university entry requirement include the high school diploma. So do a lot of internship types of programs. FAFSA, the student financial aid system, eligibility requires a high school diploma unless you're a student with significant intellectual disabilities. Next slide. Students are eligible if they have a high school diploma for financial aid. The federal definition stipulates the GED is not equivalent. So FAFSA said, does a GED indicate the ability to benefit test to qualify for the financial aid? And the answer was yes. So, excuse me. So those are put in there. The exception is if youth have an intellectual disability and are moving from school and enrolling in a comprehensive transition post-secondary program, they qualify for the financial aid. So the bottom line is the more pathways to the diploma means more graduates and fewer dropouts. ESSA stipulates students with severe cognitive disabilities qualify for an alternative diploma if they participate in standards-based alternative assessments. Next slide. Career technical education pathway is based on the state course of study mandates with an emphasis on a concentration of career technical education. CTE pathways include dual enrollment classes at the community college, so it's actually a K-14 system. Some of the CTE courses are certified as A to G. A total of 24% of students with IEPs participate in the pathway. Recently reauthorized Carl Perkins legislation says that they must include students with disabilities in the pathway, and they encourage the beginning of the pathway to begin at middle school. Next slide. So what happens to the person when you lack a diploma? You don't have a ticket. You suffer the lack of confidence and optimism. You may experience doubts and negative perceptions of self-worth. You lack the minimum qualifications for jobs. You face employer bias. You don't qualify for some types of financial aid for post-secondary education and training. You don't meet minimum qualifications for the post-secondary education and training. You face barriers to achieve successful outcomes and end up in jobs headed for obsolescence because of artificial intelligence and because of the robotics and things like that taking over. Next slide. And what does it do to a student's resilience? How does it affect goal setting and self-esteem and problem solving and self-control and social skills? It is really a challenge when you don't get a diploma to maintain that resilience. Next slide. This graphic shows what percentage of students are college and career ready. And you will note that 44% of all California youth are college and career prepared. 25% are homeless. 13% of foster youth, 16% of English learners, and 35% of socially economically disadvantaged students meet those college and career readiness. Only 10.8% of the students with disabilities are prepared. We need to change that. There are some legal issues when you think about meeting the diploma requirements. A student who graduates from high school with a regular diploma, finishes the K-12 education, is no longer eligible for special ed. An LEA is obligated to issue a diploma when a student meets regular graduation requirements. And the diploma can't be held to meet procedure requirements of IDA. One of the things that happens is we sometimes see schools that say, you know, this person just isn't mature enough to graduate, so we're going to not tell them they have a diploma or wait for them to take a class after the rest of the class graduates. If they've earned the diploma, they're required to have the diploma. And when a student meets graduation requirements, the LEA must provide the student and parents adequate notice. And neither achievement of IEP goals nor academic proficiency at the 12th grade is required for graduation with a regular high school diploma. Next slide. As we went around the state and we did these presentations, we heard a couple of myths we want to share with you. One of them is students with IEPs can't earn a diploma. Well, the fact is 70% of students with disabilities currently earn a diploma. 90% of students with IEPs have average to above average intelligence, but only 70% earn a diploma. Why? Could it be expectations? Could it be an opportunity, providing an opportunity to learn? Just a little bit of food for thought. Next slide. We also hear that it would be so unfair to students who don't need to use accommodations to give diplomas to students who need accommodations. The fact is, providing options for all students to earn a diploma does not impact any other students' opportunities for continuing their education or seeking employment. We interviewed students who were enrolled in the A to G courses, and they were preparing to transfer from high school directly to the university. We asked them if it was unfair to them if students who are challenged academically receive a diploma. The response was universal. How does it possibly affect me? I'm taking the classes I need, passing the tests I need, qualifying for financial aid. So I'm on track to do what I want to do. And they also reminded us, if they're going to work, they need a diploma. So what we concluded is fairness is an adult issue, not a student issue. Next slide. If the final destination after completing secondary and post-secondary education is employment, then we need to equip all students with academic skills, technical skills, and soft skills like communication, interpersonal skills, problem solving, creativity. We need to start early. Expectations need to be examined. And the federal definition of an alternative diploma is came out in just recently, and it said, students with the most significant cognitive disabilities assessed using the alternative assessment and awarded a state-defined alternative diploma that is standards-based, aligned with state requirements for a regular high school diploma, obtained within the time period for which the state ensures the availability of free and appropriate education, and shall not include any student awarded a GED, a certificate of completion or attendance, or a lesser credential. The key here is that the state has to define it. The Every Student Succeeds Act says only students with the most significant cognitive disabilities should receive alternative diplomas, and only if they've taken the state's alternative assessments. No more than 1% of students graduating in a state should receive the diploma. Next slide. The certificate of completion is not a diploma. Current practice is that many LEAs issue the certificate as an alternative. Sometimes it's considered a rite of passage, and I never quite figured out what they're completing. Some schools issue them at the end of the 12th grade, some of them at the end of their time in school. But there are no performance expectations on the diploma. It has little or no value to post-school environments. And if you're going to issue a certificate, you need to set expectations for academic standards, a transition portfolio, and/or industry certifications. Next slide. Employment first implications. If transition is preparing for the next environment, and the next environment with students with IDD is shifting from sheltered work environments to inclusion in the community and competitive work environments, how are those expectations impacted? How are the IEP goals impacted? What do students need to know and do to be prepared? How does the certificate of completion impact those opportunities? Next slide. The state has not defined the alternative diploma. So in the state of California, they formed a work group, but the definition and the expectations related to it have not been defined. So what can you do at the local level? And there are several districts that have contacted us saying they would like to be able to issue the diplomas. So currently they issue a variety of diplomas based on alternative means defined in Ed Code. They could include students with significant cognitive disabilities and list some of those alternative needs for those students. The diploma cannot be called an alternative diploma until the state defines what it is. Students who might be considered for a diploma using the alternative means would be students with significant cognitive disabilities who take the alternative assessment. For many places, the question is, what does our diploma really mean? For some LEAs, it means high academic standards and preparation for the university. For others, it means students who earn a diploma are prepared to go to work and further their education. Next slide. Our recommendations is to use the power of the IEP. There's a document in the Padlet that addresses this. Start early, align the graduation requirements with post-secondary goals, define the course of study related to post-secondary goals, and include dual enrollment classes if possible. Define annual goals that are standards-based and aligned with post-secondary employment goals. Use good teaching practices. Identify the support systems. Align transition services in the IEP to the pre-employment transition services and the college and career indicators. List support services available for credit recovery and accommodations for remediation, and our access to courses that are available on the internet. We need to start early. Currently, the law says begin at 16, but it should begin in early childhood. The decision regarding the diploma versus certificate starts in the 3rd grade. And the early experiences in school impact the readiness for high school. So by the 3rd grade, we're starting to decide whether or not we should give them a diploma. And we begin to teach skills that are the foundation. for transition really early. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity. Next slide. A recent reports by the Supreme Court and a Supreme Court ruling tells us that all students need the opportunity to learn academic skills. Next. If 85 to 90% of students with IEPs have average intelligence or higher, why nationally do only 65% earn the standard high school diploma? Next, are all students granted the opportunity to learn academic standards? And are teachers adequately trained in the elements of universal design and multi-tiered systems of support that are so critical for inclusive practices? We also have the Supreme Court ruling, Andrew versus Douglas County School District, and it's also in your Padlet. And now, next slide. It is my pleasure to introduce Vicki Shad, who's been a leader in transition for many years in the state of California. Vicki is currently working for CSU Chico in the teacher credentialing program and teaches classes on transition for students who will soon be in the classrooms. We're fortunate she's the vice president of the California Transition Alliance. And before retirement, she was an assistant superintendent at Glenn County Office of Education and served as a SELPA director. Take it away, Vicki.
Thank you, Sue. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I recognize many of the names on our participant list, and it's nice to know that you're out there and you're still doing such important work. I hope during this time you and all of yours are well as we navigate our future, and sure has changed some of our learning and teaching and learning practices. So I'm going to talk about annual goals. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the law, the best practices, and making them meaningful. Next slide. Okay, if you look at the Secondary Transition Planning Basics book, Sue referred to it at the beginning. It's on this Alliance's website, the January 20th, 2020 edition. All right, on page 24, it lists the mandates. It lists them, you know, they need to be done annually, they need to be reasonably calculated for ed benefit, they need to be measurable, and they need to be meaningful. Sometimes we kind of forget about the meaningful part. So as you're thinking about goals, you know, we're not going to spend time like teaching you how to write goals. We're thinking most of you know how to do that. If not, there are, we'll talk about some goal banks, and also you can look on that page 24, and it's very helpful. But what I do yeah, there's a lot of goal banks. There's SACE, there's AXA, there's CARDS, there's many others. We're just gonna hold on to that for a second here. I want you to think about what makes a New Year's resolution a goal, okay? So a lot of times we make a New Year's resolution and we make a New Year's resolution and it becomes a dream or it fades because we don't put any legs under it or we don't put an action plan. So when we're thinking about goals in the IEP at the high school level, I want you to think about them being the action plan for the post-secondary goal. So, and remember always the rule of construction. So if you write a goal that is contextual, and we're going to talk about that, it definitely can be included as part of your transition process and or activities that go with reaching their transition plan. And you don't have to put it in two places. Okay, so if you happen to be on SACE, I'm sure many of you are, I'm not sure that the Shasta County goals are still up there, transition goals, because I don't have access to that right now. But Sue did a lot of work with those, and it's a different document than the one I'm going to show you in a minute. And they said SACE, document library, Shasta County transition goals, Sue Sawyer. So you might want to check that out and see if they're still there. I'm not sure if everybody kept them up or if they were just there on with the people that asked for them to continue there. Oh, Christina says yes. Someone's typing in here at chat and telling us yes, they're still up. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is in addition to that goal bank I was telling you about. This is a sample, only a part of this section, like a screenshot. This whole thing is in the Padlet, And if you look under it, Shasta Union High School District Goal Bank, and it has different sections and actually goal areas, topics, and things that you can do. It's a nice resource. It's about probably 8 pages long. And one of the nice things that I like is at the end of it, there's a circle. And many of you have probably seen it, the depth of knowledge chart. So it talks about at different levels as to what you might be looking for a student, all the way from being able to identify something to being able to analyze something. But it's really hands-on, practical, something easy for a teacher to look at. And again, it's in the Padlet. Next slide, please. Okay, some best practices. So I talked about page 24 in our booklet. Also on page 25, we list the practices. And you recall, I'm sure, that our booklet is lined up where you've got the mandate on one side and the best practice on the other, so that you have the opportunity. And remember, always, 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 if best practice doesn't cost any more than doing the minimum mandate, why wouldn't you do it? And you need to ask yourself that, and ask others that you're working with that as well. So we talked, you know, a little bit about universal design and universal access. Sue mentioned some of these a little bit earlier, but when she talked about differentiated instruction, she also had personalized instruction on there. And I think that differentiated instruction which becomes personalized instruction, is the closest thing that we ever had for, I'm seeing chats and questions, so I'm sorry, I get distracted with that. But it's the closest I've seen from the early work that Pat Wolf did on brain research and the compatibility between teaching and learning styles. And what if a classroom was designed to meet all the different learning styles? Well, I think differentiated instruction, personalized design for learning, that both of those are wonderful ways to get as close as we can to matching what we know about brain research and teaching and learning. And again, someone, if they haven't done that before, they have to start somewhere. And those that are entering the profession are hearing more about this and how you do this. No matter how homogeneous your class may be that you're working in, you are going to have a heterogeneous group. And there's a need to differentiate in ways that can allow students to demonstrate what their knowledge and perform the skills they have. And a differentiated instruction is a really solid way. You'll see a couple of things on that in a minute. Multi-tier system support, wow, we've come of age. We're not just talking about response to intervention, which was new not that long ago. Now we're looking both at academics, we're looking at social emotional, we're looking at behavior, we're looking at tiers from like what I would consider universal design to designated supports, kind of being like tier 2 and tier 3, where you're dealing with more accommodations, or in MTSS, more triage. But it's the same concept that we're trying to get there. Is what are we doing and how are we breaking it down to reach? And Sue mentioned that one of the things that employers are looking for are soft skills. And so some of those soft skills get addressed in MTSS by having social, emotional, and behavior in the model, as well as academics. So it's really nice to see them all come design. And I'm sure some of you are doing that in the locations where you work and work. And then the elements of accessibility, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a while. And then my friend Jill is also going to share more about it with accommodations. And then, whoa, excuse me, could we stay there? Thank you. Okay, so then accommodations, we'll talk about it as well. But modifications, I really want you to think about it differently than how we have trained our brain to think about it in relationship to high stakes testing. Because modifications are not in the ed code anywhere in the way that we implement them in school with beyond statewide assessment. And there's also nothing in the ed code that says how low you can accommodate. So we need to examine that. And Sue had a slide about the power of the IEP. We need to really use the IEP to get the student what they need to be able to demonstrate what they can do. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of what differentiation is. You know, some people who are not familiar with differentiation struggle between the term accommodation and differentiation. So differentiation is something you would do for all students. You would do it in your regular planning. It's a core quality teaching, and it is a use of whole group, small group, individual, but on a routine basis in your class, no matter what class you're teaching, heterogeneous, homogeneous, or the setting, general ed, special ed, alternative ed, career tech ed. It's sound, solid practice. It's students focused, and it's a way of thinking. So if you're new to the field, it's a great time. I saw a few of you said you were new to transition. Maybe you're new to the field too. It's a great time to start looking at approaching all your lessons and your goal setting in this way. Next slide, please. This is what it's not. Okay, it's not the bluebirds, buzzards, and wombats. It's not something extra on the top of good teaching. A lot of times people use really good teaching practices that include differentiation, but they've never thought of it that way. So it's very important to stop and look at how you're teaching, and are you having multiple ways of teaching it for everybody that creates an opportunity for them to learn. Next slide, please. Oh, excuse me, can we go back one? Thank you. On the bottom of that slide, I don't think you can see this, but Carol, you see ASCD on there. And if you Google that and you put in differentiated instruction, you're going to see Carol Tomlinson's work. Many of you are probably familiar with her. You know, she did some work about, I would say, 20 some years ago, and now she has updated her work. So differentiation has been updated, like what it is and how to do it, and some real easy read, technical, teacher-driven manuals within the last 2 to 3 years. So it's definitely, if you remember from the past, she's new, renewed, and if she's new to you, there's some real good current things out there of what it is and how to do it. And remember, no matter how homogeneous the setting is you're working in, you've got a heterogeneous group of students. Next slide, please. Okay, so writing contextual goals. So I just put the definition up there. Kind of contextual goals are defined as factors that result from the situation in which performance occurs. All right, so it's just making it real. It's bringing real life into writing your goals, bringing authentic materials, authentic situations, real things into writing your goals. Okay, so when you're writing class, maybe you're writing a letter of introduction. All right, they can be used to support not only needed skills as identified, but they become transition activities that support their development planning. Make them meaningful. Link them to something. So instead of writing a goal that says, and I'm sure very few of you do this anymore, okay, especially at the high school level, is instead of saying the student will identify the main idea in the paragraph 4 out of 5 times or trials or anything that stops there. You want to have it like, there's an example here. If your district, county, or SELPA will allow you, you want to write them at the high school level as a strategy goal or a process goal. An example, we'll complete the CTE welding class by June 2021 in order to complete a graduation requirement and first step in developing the skills aligned to the post-secondary goal. Remember at the beginning, I spoke about not letting a goal be like a New Year's resolution. So linking that goal to the post-secondary goal, well, this is a great way to do that. And so you can actually connect your goal to your post-secondary goal. And remember the rule of construction. You do not have to put it 2 places in the IEP. So if you have it listed as a goal, you can put that as a reference in the transition part of your IEP and not have to do it. And then there's another example, okay, of one that's more of a strategy. By December of 2020, will ask for an agreed accommodation for test taking in 3 general ed classes measured by a goal tracking log. So you're wanting to practice the student asking for accommodation. So you've made it a goal, you've put it in their IEP, you're measuring it, and it's connected to transition. Make sense? I bet your heads are shaking. All right, we're gonna do a little poll here. This is about Matrix 1. It's the California Assessment of Student, hold on, I have to move me. Of student performance and progress. Oops, yeah. And so I want you to put yourself in those categories. So I know it exists. We use it for testing and it's documented in the IEP. We use it throughout the year for local as well as state and national testing. We teach students how to use the strategies in all 3 levels for school, work, and community supports. Please pick which one of those applies to you.
We'll give it just another few seconds as people are still voting. About half have completed.
I know it exists, good. Use it, it's documented in IEP. And then, okay, so this is kind of, I think, representative of what, microcosm of what we would see if we went out and asked this on a larger scale. So there's, next slide, please. Okay, this is in the Padlet, all right? And I'm gonna skip this slide and come back to it for a minute. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's the link. We've put it in the Padlet. It's about 88 pages. But if I was teaching high school especially, and even middle school, I would really familiarize myself with this document. And I'll explain why and how to do that. But in order for, they started, when they first started doing, you know, was it STAR testing, the first one, or maybe we called it something else before that, but is, the accommodations and modifications, it was a struggle and it was hard. And people were calling CDE on the day of the test, trying to make sure that their child could have that accommodation. So I think CDE has worked really, really hard to give us a comprehensive resource. And I'm not sure that people are delving into it enough, and they're just kind of looking at it before they give the state. And it's a wealth of information. Could we go to the previous slide, please? Okay, so in 2017, 2018, this was a quick snapshot around assessment accessibility. And the reason we put this in here was because it has the same categories: universal designs, designated supports, accommodations, resources for the California Oral Assessment. And it gives you embedded and non-embedded. And so the terms embedded have to do with the statewide testing, and the non-embedded have to do with the statewide testing. I don't want you to think about those terms, embedded or non-embedded, for the purpose of using this in transition planning and working with students and possibly setting goals along it, definitely having transition activities, integrating it into your work-based learning. If you're doing student-led IEPs, integrating it into that. Anything that has to do. And these are some of the examples. The lists are longer now. And like I said, it's in the Padlet and it's 88 pages. And so it would just be too much to go through. But this gives you an idea of them. So the updated one now is this wonderful 88-page booklet, but don't worry, you don't have to read all 88 pages. Next slide, please. Okay, whoa, back one. Thank you. All right, so all of you said you know where it was, you know what it exists. Now, sometimes I have a little trouble when I try to just click on the link. So often I have to either go directly to CDE's website to get it, or I cut and paste the link into my browser and then it works. So you may be on top of that. So no, you can have it at your fingertips electronically as well as just access it off their website. Next slide, please. Okay, the first part is universal tools. And these are things that are available to all students based on student preference and selection. So we talked a little bit about differentiated instruction, and we talked about personalized learning. So why wouldn't we want to use universal tools? They don't have to be in the IEP. They don't have to be pre-planned. They're things that are just there that students can use, available to any student. They don't have to have IEP, 504, nothing. So I want you to think about, when you look in that matrix one, in part one, I want you to look at those universal tools and say, how many of those am I teaching students, okay? How many of those am I using to teach students? And then consider that as part of your transition activities you do. Next slide, please. Designated supports. Okay, so for statewide testing, these are again available to all students. So they don't have to be written in an IEP or a 504, but they do have to be planned for. And you have to document how you decided who would get them. But a group of teachers, a parent, a student, an SST team. I know one school district who uses their SST team to collect their data on who they allow to have designated supports. Not tough. Again, the list of things that are on designated supports, I want you to think about looking to a student and finding what are some designated supports that you could teach them to ask for, to use for themselves in everyday life, school, work, community, without having to be documented in an IEP. Part three, our next slide, please. Okay, now these, for the purpose of testing, statewide testing, it's got to be in the student's IEP, all right, or their Section 504 plan. And then I said, for our purpose, we're not concerned about whether they're embedded or not embedded, or NA or any of that, because all I want you to be looking at is that column on the left-hand side of this matrix that says what it is, and then begin to be thinking about, are students good in them? I think in just about every webinar we've said, use the power of the IEP. And this could not be truer here. And when you do use accommodations for testing, you can teach kids to ask for those accommodations for other situations or to accommodate themselves, and not just limit it to statewide testing, but think of the generalized application of it. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to challenge you, not today, not on the computer, not now, but I'd like to challenge you to identify one of the designated supports. That's part two in the matrix one, and think about how you could teach it to a student to be used as a self-advocacy tool in their lives outside testing, outside school, in the adult world. So I've traveled you. Yeah, the link does not, someone's saying the link doesn't work. The link is hard to work, and it doesn't work from the PowerPoint, but the whole matrix is in the Padlet. There's supposed to be the whole matrix in there. Okay, everyday accessibility resources. I'm just about to wrap my part up here. There are so many accessibility resources that exist out in the world today and I wonder, are we writing goals around helping students learn how to use them? A whole lot of kids are using smartphones with disabilities and without. And there are so many accessibility features, so many. We could just have a class on that. But you definitely could integrate how to use their cell phones accessibility features, how to use their computers into their goals, or in their transition activities, or in your day-to-day instruction. If people were just to know how to use the accessibility features on their phone and their computers, it would enhance their ability to assimilate into society so much more and make things so much more accessible. A byproduct of all of us baby boomers becoming of age is everything has something now. You've got magnifying glasses. You have lights on magnifying glasses. I saw a beanie, a stocking cap with lights that you just press the button and there's two lights in the stocking cap so you can see better to read. You know, from magnifying glasses to bars to auditory stuff, there's just a ton of byproduct from us becoming of age. And those are out there on the free market, so they don't have to be ordered from a disabilities store or a special. Talking watches. You could buy talking watches at a jewelry store now. You don't have to order a talking watch that has in a book just for people with visual disability. So it's very interesting to think about all the things that are out there that are just part of our natural worlds that we need to teach students how to use. Next slide, please. Okay, as I wrap that up, I'd like to introduce to you Jill Larson. She's a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, but she said she'd only sign today if we could interpret for her. And I'm sure some of you can, but she's the California Transition Alliance board member. She's the membership chair. She's a retired California Department of Education transition consultant and a wonderful partner. She's going to talk to us about accommodations. Go, Jill.
Jill, before you begin, we had a question in the chat about the Shasta Union High School Goal Bank. The link isn't working from the website, but we will find them and we'll post them in the chat if possible. If we can't find them before the end of the webinar, we will post them on the Padlet. Just wanted
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. If you want to move to the next slide, please. I'm glad to welcome all of you to this wonderful information that you're learning today. We've got lots of resources for you. And this slide about including students in the selection of accommodations has a wonderful site that was developed by Martha Thurlow, who's done research in the area of accommodations for many, many years. And this is a complete module that will help you understand accommodations and the selection process. It's an excellent training device for those who might need more help in understanding exactly what accommodations are and how to choose them. As Vicki said, there is a difference between accommodations and modifications. On statewide testing, the use of modifications have specific consequences, but it can be a little different in the classroom. First of all, understanding that modifications are adaptations that change what students learn and are used with students who require more support or adjustments than accommodations can provide. Whereas accommodations level the playing field, modifications change the playing field. Unlike accommodations, modifications do change the expectations for learning, and they do reduce the requirements of the task. So just to give you a little example, suppose you have a student with a specific learning disability who has great difficulty in decoding text. You're going to want to see if there are any accommodations that can give the child access to the grade level text. So you might do the audio version of the book. When you check for understanding and comprehension, you might not see that much progress. So you might want digital book that speaks to you as well as highlights each word as it's going through there. When you check for understanding and comprehension, again, maybe you're not seeing the progress you need, and you will have to actually implement a modification, which would be moving the student down to a lower level book. But modifications can be helpful in helping the student move towards educational benefit. So if dropping it down back just a little makes them continue to work forward in the classroom, that would be a good thing. And you can keep practicing and practicing to see if you can get to an actual accommodation. As you practice these different accommodations, when you find something that is really useful for the student and they're really moving forward, then that's when you want to put it in the IEP. That will make sure that all classes and all teachers that come in contact with the student will be aware of that, and they will use that because it is very successful. One thing about accommodations is that if the child has never used a particular accommodation, but it's in the IEP and then they go to state testing and they're given that accommodation, it can really confuse the kid. So you want to make sure, rather than just checking all accommodations that sound good to you, that the student really knows how to use the accommodations. And you're free to experiment in the classroom all you want with these. It's very important to include students in the selection process. And why is that? Well, first of all, students can gain an understanding of their own disability, and it helps them develop self-advocacy skills. I'm going to tell you a little story about one student I had. He was hard of hearing, and it was documented in his IEP that he would not wear his hearing aids. He did not want to wear his hearing aids. No matter what they tried, he would not wear his hearing aids. So I thought, uh-oh, when I started working with this kid. But he was a really bright kid, and we worked on understanding his disability, understanding specifically his hearing loss, and then understanding how his hearing aid was developed to mitigate his hearing loss. And this kid was really into debate. So by the end of our discussions, I had him write a paragraph, the affirmative and the negative of wearing hearing aids. And he really came up with some very good ideas. For example, he's not going to wear his hearing aid to a concert. That's going to be way too loud. But in an interview situation, yeah, he would be willing to wear his hearing aids. But what was even more interesting to me was that he told me that in the past, teachers have just told him, you have to wear a hearing aid. And they never had this discussion with him. And he said he really appreciated it because now he understood his disability and he understood that he had a choice and he could make a wise choice. So that was really terrific. In helping a student develop their self-advocacy skills, I had a 10-year-old student who was hard of hearing. He wore hearing aids. He was also learning sign language. But when I came in to work with him, one of his goals was to understand his accommodations. So of course, making that teacher language on the IEP transfer to what that really means, we worked on that. We made flashcards. He wrote the teacher language of what the accommodation was. And on the back, he wrote, what does that mean to him? And we finally ended up going through each one and having him determine which ones were really useful to him and which ones were not useful to him. And he got to the point at the end of the year that I recommended at his next IEP meeting, he lead the discussion on accommodations. So it's really important. Obviously, the kids understand themselves best and what they need. If we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, accommodations for students with low incidence disabilities. So I included this ed code so that we understand what those are. Hearing impairments, vision impairments, severe orthopedic impairments, and any combination of the above are what is considered low incidence disabilities. Now, when accommodating students with low incidence disabilities, there's often a lot of assistive technology available and needed for these students. And like Vicki said, as we age, we learn some of the advantages of these accommodations, but we can't always know what's out there if we're not in need of it ourselves. So this first resource I'm showing you, it actually is a fee-for-service website, and I am not by any means promoting it. I have never actually used it as a service, but what the website has that you might find helpful is that it lists by disability category. So for example, one of the categories is blind. If you click on blind, it comes up with a whole list of assistive technology, including pictures, including what that technology can do for the student. So I found that very, very helpful. Of course, if you want to pay a fee, they will help assess your students and help you determine which is the best assistive technology there. Like I said, I've never used it myself, so I'm not recommending it specifically. The second resource is the TASK Technical Center. It is a parent training and information center in the southern part of the state. It is funded by the State Department of Education, but they specialize in assistive technology, and they will assess a student and come up with a plan for securing and teaching teachers and students how to implement the assistive technology. What I found interesting now, given that we're all staying at home, it kind of opens up their services even more because they are offering Zoom consultations. So that allows all of us to take advantage of their services right now. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now the students are ready to go on to work. And what do we have to consider about accommodations in the work setting? So you want to think about what accommodations is the student using in the instructional setting. Be fully aware of those. Will those accommodations be useful in the work setting? So it'll be really important to work with the job coach and the student. Again, the student is key here. I'm sorry, I set an alarm and it's going off all over the place here. To determine what accommodations would be useful. And again, I have another fun story about that. When I worked at the School for the Deaf in Fremont, we had a lot of students that were placed at Togo's, a sandwich shop. And one of our students was placed there, and he had some learning disabilities on top of his deafness, and he could not remember the name. You know, they always have funky names of the sandwiches. He couldn't remember by the name of the sandwich what was in the sandwich, and he was not a confident enough reader to list the words of the ingredients either. So he was really stressed and he really wanted to do a good job. And he came up with the idea of color coding. So for each sandwich, he would put the different colored dots, and those would mean a certain ingredient. And he and his job coach went to the manager and asked if that would be okay. Can he post this on the wall? And the manager was like, explain it to me. And then the manager said, I know my other workers would like this too. And it totally became incorporated in the way that store operated using the color coding. But it was the student who knew that this was his strength and that's the way he needed to go. So always important to include the students. Sometimes we forget that they know themselves the best. Okay, in an interview situation, we have to consider how does the student communicate with others? And will the student's typical communication mode enable the student and the employer to converse in a typical interview setting? Will modifications to that setting need to be made? And will assistive technology be necessary? So I'm focusing here on a deaf or hard of hearing student since that's my background. But of course, in an interview situation, a deaf student might need an ASL interpreter. ASL interpreters need to be secured well in advance, and unfortunately, they tend to be a bit pricey. A little bit less costly is VRI, video remote interpreting. This is less costly and it can be scheduled instantaneously and the student can get it on their phone. So it'd be a live interpreter on the phone going back and forth with the employer. If you, in this era, we're doing Zoom meetings every day, right? And if the student has an opportunity to do an interview via technology. Google Hangouts actually has speech-to-text captioning on it. It works really well one-on-one if it was just the interview and the employer. Zoom does have captioning abilities, but someone actually has to type that in. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. But what are the resources for securing these things? Well, if the student is a DOR consumer, and they're working with them to get a job, DOR will provide an interpreter. Or perhaps they're working with EDD through America's Job Center. They can provide the interpreter. Or perhaps they're just exiting TPP or workability, who will also provide an interpreter. So there are some resources. On the job, this document resource is for employers, but I thought it had a lot of good information for teachers and schools as well. For example, an employer is impressed with an applicant's resume and contacts the individual to come in for an interview. The applicant, who is deaf, requests a sign language interpreter for the interview. The employer cancels the interview and refuses to consider further this applicant because he believes he would have to hire a full-time interpreter while the person was on the job. The employer has violated the ADA. The employer should have proceeded with the interview using a sign language interpreter, absent undue hardship, and at the interview inquire as to what extent the individual would need a sign language interpreter to perform any essential functions requiring communication with other people. So it goes through and gives lots of examples, helps the employer and those of us who are assisting students as well. Next slide, please. Okay, the pièce de résistance. If you don't look at any other resources, look at JAN, the Job Accommodations Network. It is amazing, and its ability to search specifically for things you need is awesome. You can put in the student's disability, you can put in the type of job, and it will come up with ideas that you need. If you'll go to the next slide. This is the A to Z of disabilities, and it will give you information about disabilities in general, by limitation, work-related functions, topics, and accommodations. You can do a search for anything you need there. And the final slide, please. You can also receive information by role. So if you're looking for information to give employers to help them understand their disabled employee, it has great information for individuals themselves and for others. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Vicki to introduce Tracy.
Hi, Jill. Thank you. Nice. Tracy Hurd, this is her first time presenting with us. She's new to the California Transition Alliance board. She represents a region for us, and we're very happy to have her with us today in her day life. She's a resource specialist, and she's going to talk to us about CTE and integrating individuals with disabilities. Take it away, Tracy.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm really excited to be here, and this is my first webinar, so please bear with me. Today I'll be talking about what is certified technical education and the benefits that it has for our special education students. So next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. What is certified technical education? There are programs that are short-term specialized vocational training that provides academic and technical related work skills to prepare students for after work. Next slide. CTE, one of the reasons that I am a CTE proponent is that it is purposeful. A lot of our students kind of lose, at the high school level, lose their interest and their value in actually pursuing their high school diploma and their education. But through CTE programs, they can actually bring back a little bit more validity to their purpose in actually completing a diploma. So the reason why I like to refer to it as purposeful is because the classes teach specialized skills. So it's not just the paper to pen classes or just sitting online doing language arts or math, but students have the opportunity to actually participate in classes that they actually feel that they can actually learn something in and actually have a hands-on experience. The CTE courses can also empower students as well because they feel like they're coming to school for a reason that's beneficial to them. And it provides opportunities also for them to have true career exploration opportunities and experiences through mentorships, work study, job shadowing, apprenticeships, and also just gives them the opportunity to also start the career research process a lot earlier. Also, CTE programs are very economical, especially in this day and age with rising college costs and debt. These programs can begin actually in the high schools and actually articulate over to the community colleges as well. They're free, basically, for a lot of our students. And also it provides students a head start advantage to get them ready for college and career after high school. Next slide. Per the California Department of Education, there are 15 industry sectors and there's about 58 possible pathways. Depending on which website that you look at or what assessment tools that you use, you may have a few more, a few less of the pathways identified, but the CTE industry sectors are pretty much the same. So students can actually look at these industry sectors and investigate possible career pathways within those sectors and start looking at courses and class and requirements to enter those sectors while they're still in high school. And I'm sorry. We can, next slide. Okay, the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act is through Perkins 5. It recommended that states start to incorporate CTE within academic coursework, which it actually gives our students, for the most part, a little more options. So instead of having to take chemistry or astronomy or math for a third year, in their junior year, they can start to take CTE vocational courses, which again will prepare them more for those transitional opportunities for them when they graduate high school. So, can you go back to the next slide? So there are 3 courses of study for the programs, and they really have to include or should include some type of coordinated courses that actually include academic and technical support services and content. That's really, really important because even if students go through the CTE process, they still have to meet the regular high school graduation requirements as well. Next slide. Combining academic and work-based learning practices within the high school. These programs are not, I wouldn't say, from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of them in my area, but they are working on doing that. But CTE programs can be accessed through LinkedIn work-based learning. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm a little bit nervous. But the LinkedIn work-based learning programs actually provide students with more options. So they'll be able to decide, more clearly whether or not they want to go directly to work after high school, if they want to go complete a CTE program, if they haven't been able to complete a certificated program while in high school, or continue in a community college. Our local college here, we work really well with Norfolk College, and they have a plethora of apprenticeship programs and CTE programs that our students have access to. And we do have also some on our campuses, but unfortunately we don't have enough. And so it's not always accessible to all students, but they are out there. And sometimes students and parents have to go out and really look for them. But the LinkedIn work-based learning actually still, again, it's about options, giving students options. Next slide. If you can click on the Campbell High School's, the link, those are live links there. Those Campbell High School, Silicon Valley, and Career Valley Technical Ed, those schools have really, really excellent programs for our kids. And I was really, really impressed with, the implementation that they have and a level of success. So if we do not have time to watch the videos, please click on them later and watch them. I mean, it's really very, very impressionable, the results that they've had with our students. You guys kind of blinked out. Yeah. I don't know if did the video come up? I didn't see the video come up. No? Okay, but if they're not playing right now, that's fine.
The image came up, Tracy, so people saw what it looks like on the entrance.
Okay.
So we're good.
later on, when you go on to Padlet, just click on you can click on it and watch the videos later. They're also on YouTube, but they're very intricate programs, and they've had, again, really, really high levels of success. Next slide. Okay. Colorado's work-based learning program, I refer to this program because it was actually very, very well outlined and very, very to the point. You know, dealing with special education at the high school level with in doing post-secondary transitions over the last 4 years, I've learned that everything needs to be streamlined. The more streamlined and specific to the student, the better. It helps students and parents make clearer decisions, helps make more informed and appropriate decisions when the information is streamlined. When we overwhelm parents and students with too much information, sometimes it really kind of holds them back and hinders them more than helps. So there's also a live link for the Colorado Work-Based Learning Continuum Program as well online that you can look at. But again, it's about streamlining. So this is a really good example of what we can offer our students. Next slide. Okay, CTE delivers for parents and students. Why is it important? 90% of students involved in CTE and parents are satisfied with their high school experience. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of students who are in special education and are not graduating, they're leaving high school and they're just graduating to their parents' couch, or they're graduating to their rooms on their video games all night. But students that go through the CTE program, they're more satisfied. They feel like they have more, they're more vested in their futures, and they're more successful in high school overall. 93% of the graduation rate for students who take the concentrated CTE course is average of 10% higher than the national average, and 82% of CTE students are satisfied with their ability to learn. I think that's really, really important, because to go back to what Sue was saying earlier about confidence, if students have confidence and they believe in what they're learning, they don't look at school as learning or as a chore. They look at it as a benefit for them, as something that they're fully vested in and they can be successful with. And 91% of parents and students at CTE believe their child is getting a leg up in their career. Next slide. We have if we can push enter so that the information can slide over, there's a top part. Okay, so other benefits for CTE. There's a huge demand for skilled workers and skilled positions in California, and I think nationally. A couple years ago, I'm a part of the Norco College CTE advisory board there, and they were saying how eventually there was going to be about 10,000 jobs available in Inland Empire alone for skilled workers, but they didn't have the amount of employees, the skilled worker trained employees, to meet those demands, which is one of the reasons why Norco College tried to expand their CTE programs there. So there's a huge, huge need for skilled worker positions in the work industry, but unfortunately there's a huge deficit of qualified workers to fill those jobs. If you push enter, the other information will come over the percentages. You know, so I don't want to read over all of that, but it just gives them percentages, in regards to the validity, of having CTE. And for students, possibly, really looking seriously into these programs, because it actually gives, again, our students a heads up. It gives them, an opportunity to participate in an educational program that's meaningful for them. Next slide. Okay, college literacy starts early. I really wanted to speak on that in the early part. I actually had the unique opportunity to observe a program called World of Work in action in San Diego at a couple elementary schools. And it was really amazing to see young students in the 2nd and 3rd grade doing true career investigation, and actually learning about, what it takes to be a geologist, what it takes to be an engineer. And they were using career ready vocabulary in elementary school. The program was very, very fluid. I thought it was something that if it was implemented earlier on throughout the educational process, what the process would be phenomenal. Sorry. But I was really, really excited to see that program. So it just really resonated with me how important it is that we start speaking with students and teaching them and exposing them to college and career vocabulary and opportunities earlier on in investigative methods. Also, with learning about college and career information early, it helps drive like the IEP. You know, writing an IEP sometimes, especially in high school, is difficult to write. It's difficult to come up with realistic, attainable transition goals because you're actually have things to consider as far as the student's interests, the student's ability, and also the parents and what their dreams and goals are for their students. So it can be difficult, but if we have that, the information and the data to help back and support that student in what their interests are, it's easier to write, in my opinion, it's easier to write more valid and attainable appropriate transition goals. Next. YCT for specialized population. Again, I think it is confidence. If we can find a way to build students' confidence while they're in school and their ability to be able to learn and to be able to utilize those skills that they learn in high school, I really feel that they'll be more successful in the long run. A lot of students that I work with over the years that's gone on to community college, one of the main reasons that they stop going is because they don't know how to access support services. They don't really feel like they need academic support services. They don't know where to look for services. And they don't have the confidence in themselves to go out and actually ask and be able to articulate what their needs are and what their goals are. So therefore, they have a really difficult time in developing a realistic pathway for that. So it's very, very important that we really start, you know, working with students, or we work at building a foundation where we build their confidence in what their capabilities are. So it also, you know, helping them be able to be able to see down the pike as far as, you know, if when they finish high school, what their options are. And it's not just always four-year college. A lot of students come in and they think that automatically we have to take this chemistry and we have to take 2 years of foreign language and we have to apply to four-year college, but there are other viable options for our students, and it's very important that we inform both students and parents and also teachers in regards to those things. So I think it all starts with like the building a fundamental level of confidence in their ability to be able to be successful in high school. Next slide. These are some statistics. I don't think I need to go over all of those statistics, but I do think some of the most positive is that the percentages of students that go through CTE programs, how high it is in far as graduation. 90% of CTE students graduate from high school. That's amazing. And it's also, and I think it's because they feel like high school at that point is doable as long as they're doing something that they're actually interested in doing. And there's purpose in them being in high school. Students also feel more connected and they're active in participating in their own educational planning and their own educational processes. When they're in classes and courses that they feel that they're going to get something back, there's going to be some type of reward for them. At-risk students are less likely to drop out of enrolled programs of CTE. 80% of students enrolled in CTE or college prep, they meet college and career readiness. And for our students, I think that's a real struggle with truly meeting college and career readiness because it's not always about the college. I think there isn't a clear understanding that students and some parents have with the 4-year and 2-year college readiness versus being career ready and how it can actually play hand in hand, or there can be totally different pathways as well. 80% of participants pursue higher educational pathways. That is just learning to be more academically mature. I think after going through high school and then completing a CTE program and getting out there in the work world and feeling more independent, some students may feel more motivated to go back to pursue a higher education at that point because they've built that academic confidence in themselves to be able to do something and meet their goals because they've already met their goals already, or some goals. 50% of employers state schools are not preparing workers for the real work world. If they're in the previous slides, I don't think I mentioned it, but that was a huge issue with some employers. There was a survey done in Orange County, I believe, in which employers, some of the responses were that 52% of the employers stated that most of the employees that they were hiring were not qualified or didn't have the skills to work in that particular area. So there's a huge deficit again for qualified skilled workers in positions these days. Next slide. Where can the CTE classes be attained? High schools. Classes can begin in conjunction with high school courses via their electives. Students can be dual enrolled with your local community college in the high school taking courses, and some can articulate over, or they can begin classes depending upon what's offered within a school district. They can go directly into CTE schools, like the schools in Silicon Valley. The local community colleges also offer like the short-term, low-cost CTE pathways certification programs. Classes, they can begin from 2 classes all the way up to 9 or 10. It depends on the pathway that the students select. There's a link on the next slide that gives an example of some of the CTE courses that Norfolk College offers, as well as my school district, what we offer for students as well. We only have 1 high school in our district that offers a huge variety of CTE courses where students can actually leave, and be ready to go into the workforce. But it just depends, really on what avenue of what industry sector that they will select. And also they can actually also attend the expensive private vocational schools, which I always kind of like steer our students away from. And I always try to push them towards the local community college because they have the disability resource centers there. They can go utilize the workability programs there for academic support, for academic guidance. There's still some supports there, that are available to them. And plus, again, it is low cost. Next slide. Options. That slide didn't correct, but anyway, all of this slide, I selected this picture because it just gives like an example of how someone can go into a short-term, 6-month program and graduate and get a job making double what a 4-year college degree graduate can make. And I'm pretty sure all you guys have someone in your family or know someone who's gone through a 4-year college program or even a master's program, and they're not making $50,000 a year. But a welder, that's a possibility. There's programs and apprenticeship programs with the automated manufacturing where students are graduating in 6 months and they're making nearly $50,000 a year. So I just put that in as just like an option, just a little note there to emphasize like the importance of options. And here, these are all live links here that that I use for references, and also that provides other types of resources for you to kind of thumb through. If you have any other questions or anything, I know I kind of rattle on a lot. This is my first time doing a webinar. You can please email me or call me, and I'll be more than happy to share anything that I have with you in regards to the CTE programs. I think one of the things that I didn't cover is utilizing how to use it to write goals, based upon the Holland codes, or using Colorado Career Zone or ONET or Virtual Job Shadow as all resources for students to do assessments so that they can actually learn to make those decisions on what type of program they would like to pursue. So I don't think I covered that, but again, I can add that link onto for California Career Zone.
Tracy, this is Vicki. Tracy, this is Vicki. We covered most of that in the previous webinar, so they should be good.
Okay.
And you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. I was nervous, but anyway, so again, if you have any questions, please email me or call me. I'll be more than happy to address anything that you guys may need.
Tracy, you got a lot of kudos on the chat box. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice
Tracy,
job.
you're a star. Thank you to all the presenters, such great information. And Tracy, we would have never known it was your first webinar, so congratulations.
No.
You're official. And the next slide, we have a short survey for you to complete. We read all of the responses to improve the work that we're doing and the information that we're providing you. So we hope you have an excellent week. We hope to see you next week on Wednesday, May 20th. For the parent role in the transition process. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.